ourselves. So before we move on with activities today, I just wanted to connect with everybody about the, wait a second, about the work we've done so far. And just know if there's any or comments or questions from either last week's discussion and practice or anything else we touched on. So just to remind you, last week we did the practice with the extended exhale after some thoughts on the nervous system and sort of the foundation of that system, and how to consider the acceptance of our pre-wired nervous system as a good starting point. Any thoughts or comments or ideas? Melanie, can I just ask what your baby's name is?
Nikolai.
Oh.
Nikolai.
Nikolai.
Hi, Nikolai. Beautiful.
Nikolai said hello. No? No. Yeah, he wanted to say hello.
Nikolai is a product of yes, he can always come. Nikolai is a product of Melanie's deep dedication to pranayama practice, and he was the surprise after the pranayama workshop, so that was a great blessing.
Yes. Yes.
Lotte, any thoughts last week? You weren't with us live?
I weren't. It was completely chaos, but I think like this, it's a blessing we can rewire our brains from well, it's still chaos, but what helps me is the breathing. When I wake up, when I'm stressed, when I feel uncomfortable, I breathe. So that's a blessing.
Okay, you all froze for a moment, so I was just waiting. That wasn't such a long pause after comment, Lotte, but I hear you with the breathing, and part of what Lotte does is a little bit of rewiring the meat body with treatments like acupuncture. Welcome, Catherine. Oh, it's freezing quite a lot.
I can add to my comment, when I treat people with acupuncture, I always have a tape on with mindfulness breathing, and like 80% of the patients, they want to do it, and it makes them even calmer week by week. So it's important to make the treatment more efficient.
Wonderful. Catherine, I also just opened up the microphone. If anybody wants to share thoughts, experiences, questions. Everybody's frozen on my side. Let me see. Am I as frozen for you guys? For me, let's hope that it works now. I just restarted some things here. Having you guys just share is, for me, an important part of this, because, you know, although I like to talk and share my thoughts, I much prefer dialogue to monologue. when it comes to reflecting on different ideas. So Lotte has been a fantastic participant in many of the dialogues in the past almost 10 years or so.
2014, I
And,
think.
I've always gained a lot. 2000, yeah. So getting there,
Mhm.
8 years. And for me, that's really important. It's important to get feedback, you know, from what we do and to rise within you guys. And, you know, because every person for whom these ideas flow creates something new and adds something to the conversation. And, you know, in 2018, we had a celebration of Desikachar's 80th birthday at Kripalu. And there were several teachers who were students of his, and they were all really different people, but you could see like a thread of something through them that they had in common. And but their personalities were very, very different, and they had very, very different approaches to it. But each of them had a pretty interesting way of thinking about it. So, you know, you are all part of that tradition as well now. And, you know, if I had to introduce everybody here, you know, I would be talking about what amazing people you are in these, you know, moments of insight that comes from, you know, knowing each of you, whether it was in Assisi or here in Regensburg or just virtually, there's something there. So you can keep talking. I don't mind that. I wanted to give Catherine, when you came on, everything cut out, but I just wanted to open up before we move forward today about the last 3 sessions or anything that comes to you, that comes to mind, or any questions or reflections or feedback from what we've done so far.
Thank you, Tammy. All I want to add is that there's something here that's worth waking up at 5 a.m. for. So.
I'm impressed. So, and you have also, well, you have inspired me. And I was telling Jackie earlier, on Sunday, I gave a talk to a local chapter of the Democratic Party. So the Democrats in the United States have a caucus of international, so Americans who live overseas. And there's a chapter of that here, and they asked me to do a talk on science. And so between this series and that talk that I just gave, it's been sort of an awakening of the polymath in me, of, you know, bringing in a little bit of neuroscience and astronomy and political science and political history and the way that I think about things is becoming a little bit more clear, and how I express that to people is becoming more clear. So I want to thank you for showing up, for being part of this, because this is sort of, for me, the first exploration of finding this voice, whatever this voice is that I have, and adding my thought processes to how we come to yoga and how we practice yoga. And did anybody, so when I sent out the follow-up email last week, I had a link to a little short story, science fiction short story. Did anybody click on that? Yeah. Jackie, so it's a really simple, I'll sort of summarize the short story. It's written in the form of a dialogue between 2 beings. There's no introduction, there's no follow-up. It's just a conversation between 2 beings. And one of those beings is very clearly on the earth. And the other one is some commander somewhere to whom this being is reporting. And it essentially starts out with the being that's on earth saying, look, you're not going to believe this, but those things that sent us those radio signals, the things that are reaching out to the galaxy, those things are made of meat. And the commander can't believe this. He says, what do you mean they're made of meat? Like, are you sure they're not just, covered in meat, but there's like some kind of electron plasma inside, really thinking? No, like the meat is doing the thinking. The meat is, they communicate with each other by flapping their meat at each other, and they sing by blowing air through their meat holes. I thought that's great. So it's really this being can't believe that the intelligence on this planet is thinking meat. And I think that's like the humblest way and a really funny way of thinking about this human condition. Like we are walking, thinking piles of meat and bones. And, without the capacity to send electronic signals through this meat, we would just be a pile of meat lying on the floor. But we have the capacity to send electricity through the meat, and that gives us essentially everything that we call life. And so that this is sort of how my brain works, that's kind of the way I think about asana. So when we get to sort of this reflections on yoga through the practice of like Ashtanga yoga, sort of breaking down to the different components, we have the relationship with our values, the relationship with our attitudes towards the experiences around us, the relationship towards the energetics of this system, and then we have the reality that we're a pile of meat living in the field of gravity. And oh, you like my husband's art behind me? Yes. So this was a fractal my husband made. For those of you who don't know, my husband has like a job that makes money, and then he has this hobby, which is creating apps. And one of his apps is a beautiful software that you can go explore the topography of fractal world. So you can zoom in and zoom out and change colors. And so the way that I think of asana is in relationship to gravity. And so today I wanted to touch on sort of, I think, the most fundamentally important part of that, which is the sort of sixth sense. So the nerves that we use to experience our connection to the outside world, the proprioceptors of the body. And because I feel like those parts of that part of our nervous system is really the heart of what we call visualization in the yoga tradition. So this idea of using our imagination and applying the imagination to the physical sensations of the body, and the capacity that has to impact our system. And one of the stories I wanted to tell as we move on to today, I wanted to spend a little more time moving and feeling than we have so far. But there's a man named Ian Waterman, and I'll link his details after the call. And Ian is one of few people who has lost his proprioceptor nerves. So he had a virus when he was about 19 years old, and it triggered his immune system to attack these nerves in his body. So he cannot feel, he can feel heat and things, but the sense of touch is gone. And not only the sense of touch, but these nerves also help orient your body in space. So if he, for example, is not looking at part of his body, it's just sort of floating around. He has no sense of where it is in space. And most people who have this affliction have not regained the capacity to move easily in the world. So they're typically bound to a chair. The limbs have to be sort of held, or they just sort of start popping up. And one of the things that he did, and he has started really a whole new therapeutic field. He knows most of the other people with his condition because there's so few of them. But at one point, while lying in bed with this condition, he started looking at a part of his body and imagining that it was moving, imagining he was doing something with his body. And through this visualization process, he started to activate the muscles and nerves that needed to happen to create the movement that he intended. So he was able to essentially use his visual input to create a new neural pathway for movement. So he could control the limb if he could look at it. And eventually he has even gotten to the point, maybe I think it's 40 years now, he's lived with this condition, that he can walk, which I think he's the first person with this condition who can walk. And he can, when he speaks, he gestures. So he looks like somebody who typically has control. And he has even refined it to the point where they've tested him. And some of these gestures, if they take away the visual input so that he can't see his hands, as he's telling stories, he continues to gesture, but he has to consciously do it. He has to consciously visualize these movements. But now the neural pathways have been set, so the imagination of movement is creating actual movement in his body. And he has a lot of limitations. And for example, he said if he's standing somewhere and the lights go out, he will fall down. He just collapses because he needs that visual stimulation. So that for me is this beautiful example of this space between what we call the prana system, the energetic system, the electrical impulses, as Lotta's expressing here, and this pile of meat that we are. So I think, the traditional approach to pranayama and asana are so interconnected. And like, in addition to that, this classical practice of pratyahara, this sort of inner sensory concept, are really, for me, three of the same thing. So when I look at sort of Ashtanga yoga as an idea of 8 concepts, it's really sort of the intentional part, the yamas and niyamas. Then these asana, pranayama, pratyahara are really 3 aspects of the same system, and the inner practices in addition to that. So I wanted to sort of touch on this part of our meat body, electrical system, and just with some experiments. And a lot of this work, I want to give credit especially to Leslie Kemenoff, who is a colleague of Mirka and Gary's, and I've actually hosted him here twice now in Regensburg. Somehow my little community, we managed to make it work because Leslie could pull in quite a few people. So we had him come here, and so I got a chance to work with him here in my home. We did some private sessions, and then the workshops that we ran here. And he really had me thinking about this approach, and how his approach and my approach are similar in that we both sort of just want to feed people some thoughts to give them a foundational education so that they start creating these experiments with their own systems to sort of feel what is alive in their system, and how this understanding of anatomy, understanding of the environment in which we live, predominantly gravity here, how it can really impact our whole physical structure. So, and then in addition to that, I want to connect with the senses, so what we feel in our body. So the overreaching theme of today is, how do I feel? And this means, how do I feel? This system of nerves that help us connect to the physical world, not just through touching externally, but the sensations of things happening in our system. And even deeper, the reality that our emotional state creates sensory experiences within our bodies. And so how we can use this relationship with our proprioceptors to even become more attuned to what's happening emotionally, psychologically, through signals that our bodies are sending us. So that's sort of the idea with the practice today. Are there any thoughts? Let me just pin this. There we go. Any questions or thoughts as we move forward before we come to a practicing kind of position?
Can you define or describe the proprioceptor nerves a little bit more? That's a new term for me.
Well, they are the nerves responsible for this, like the tactile sense. So the sensation of pressure, basically. You can, so Ian, for example, he can still feel heat and cold, but he can't feel physical contact. So he, you know, if you hand him something, he'll take it, but it's a bit awkward because he, you know, when we take something from another person, we feel the pressure, you know, we have a concept of how strongly to grasp and things like that. And that's all gone. So he cannot feel his feet touching the floor. You know, he cannot feel the wind. He said he's still, it doesn't mean touching doesn't bring him pleasure, but it's, again, he taps into the imagination that, you know, stroking a dog feels a certain way, you know, touching a beloved person still creates that emotional response. But, and there's a book I haven't read yet. I give you the connection to the book there, but I'm curious how he speaks about emotions and his capacity to touch. Because, you know, that for us, if you know, touch certain things, it creates an emotional response. And he implied through an interview that emotional response is still there for him, even though he can't feel the actual pressure. So this is like, you know, some people refer to those nerves as sort of a sixth sense, because it's really, it's not just connecting you with the outside sense of touch, but there's really a sensory experience of different parts of your body that you could feel using these same systems.
I reflect upon that. I use these proprioceptor nerves around the joints when I treat pain with acupuncture, chronic pain, mostly. It's best on treating chronic pain. And we all know that when we are mentally unstable or having mental pressure, we feel more pain. So I think it's really interesting that you are talking about, because it gives another dimension, and the connection between it is the proprioceptor nerves.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah,
and you know, and like you know, last week one of the themes was, you know, we come pre-programmed in our nervous system, and physiologically on all levels we come pre-programmed. You know, this body is designed for existing on the earth. You know, how we breathe, the way we breathe, the way our structure holds itself upwards, it's all developed for this life, you know, fully and completely. And yeah, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what you take out of this, Lotta, in service of your patients. So as we come into sort of feeling the body, I suggest sitting on a chair or somewhere where you can sit with your feet touching the floor. And let me switch cameras here so I can see a little bit better. Oh, you know what? I'm going to share my screen here, actually. Just at the beginning, anyway. Okay. Can you guys see that? The feet?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I will pin it on me. So, okay. So we have, these are actually my feet. So the way I avoid copyright infringement is using my own body. So these are a scan of my feet taken at a business that creates insoles for shoes. And he has a big scanner that you can stand on. And I asked him to make me copies of my feet. And so this is familiar to I think everybody here, but we'll review it again. These blue dots being the place of the strongest weight, the strongest bearing of weight on your feet. So these 3 points are essentially the points where the foot connects to the ground. And the red lines just indicate the natural arches that exist between these 3 points to carry the weight of the body. And when you have hypermobile joints like I do, these structures can be quite challenged because the integrity of these structures depend upon a little bit of strength in the collagen between the bones. So the things that hold the bones together have to be squishy and also rigid. And in my case, they're a little bit too squishy. So my arches can easily collapse. So with people like me, I've needed to work on muscular development and awareness to sustain the structure of my feet that will just slowly smush towards the floor with time if there is no effort on my part. And you can see this over on it's on the right side, but it's actually it is the right foot. That is the right foot. It's on the right side. And you can see a little bit, this whiteness is where there's more pressure. And you can see sort of the toes, the arches of the toes here are squished a little bit more to the floor. And this for me is that this arch between A and B, the transverse arch, is squished down to the floor. So this is one of the reasons I have insoles in my shoes. It helps to lift and support this natural arch that's here. When I started working with this person and supporting my feet, this whole C and B arch was pretty much to the floor on both feet. And sometimes even A and C would start to squish towards the floor. So this balance of these 3 parts is really the foundation of our standing. And again, this exploration was really inspired by Leslie and the work he does. He does some great work on the feet and the foundation and walking. He has a whole workshop just on essentially the feet. But what he helped me recognize in this exploration of my own feet is that I can use the sensation of these blue dots, these A, B, and C, to feel the alignment of my whole body. So if you're sitting in a chair, or if you're standing, we'll actually all come to standing eventually. But as you're sitting in the chair, sit a little bit towards the front so you're not leaning back. So there's a little bit of weight on the feet. But see if you can feel these 3 points, these A, B, and C. So A is sort of the big toe side, B is the little toe side, and C is the heel. So a tandem stance, that's the technical word for balance, standing on 2 feet, basically. I refer to this in my classes as this is samasthiti, equal balance. This sensation of not too much on either of those 3 points, but a sensation of balance across all 3 points. And so when we sit on a chair, there's not as much weight on the feet. So there might not be as much sensation of these 3 points, but just notice if you have a sense of equal distribution of the weight between all 3 points on each foot. Notice if you feel the sensation of arches, these 3 arches, the one between the balls of the feet, the inside and outside arches. So because we don't have a lot of weight on them, the arches don't get as activated. So the arches are fantastic things. The more weight you put on them, the more capacity they have to lift. Unless, like my feet, they're a little squishy. So if you don't have such squishy feet, the arches might be very prominent. Like for me, as I sit, my transverse arch, the one in the front, is a little melty. And it takes the weight of my feet and some awareness to wake it up. So just a few times, if you're sitting, we're going to do something. So get the feet in a position that you're going to have them in as if you're going to stand up. Notice that sense of balance, and then just stand up on the feet and notice how your weight is distributed. Just like in the first few seconds. Does it quickly come up to an equal distribution? Do you need to sort of adjust the feet to feel comfortable once you stand up? And then sit down again and feel that same sensation of all three. And just move a couple times up and down. Up and back down, and just notice if there is a gap in time between a balanced feeling sitting and a balanced feeling standing. And if there is a gap, just notice how much time it takes to sort of resolve it and feel balanced standing versus sitting. This is something generally that changes with age. Not for all people and not in all circumstances. Depending on what you're doing in your daily life, that'll be different. So one of the ways we can think about, one of the ways that is often a time where particularly older people stumble or have issues is this transition period. That it takes the body more time to find this balance point before we go into our day and start walking. So just notice if you feel a significant lag or if it feels pretty quick to go from one to the other. So there's not a lot of evidence either way, just because there haven't been a lot of studies done, but there's some people starting to pay attention to things like this capacity to find balance more quickly as we stand up. So one of the exercises we can keep doing as we get older to train that sensation in the feet. Right? And as we go through these explorations, feel free to unmute yourself with a question or a comment or just something you notice. So this is more like everything we do here is more like a little piece of a science experiment. So as information comes, feel free to share it. And then eventually, we're going to come to the standing position. And just notice now these 3 points under your foot, under both feet, actually. Now everything's a little bit crooked. There we go. Now we can see the feet. And we're just gonna play a few games with the feet. So see if you can feel this point A on both feet. A is by the big toe, the ball of the foot on the big toe side. B is the little toe side of the ball of the foot. And C is the heel. And some tips, if you have a hard time distinguishing the points in the front, you can lift the toes. So there's some traditions that really focus on sort of lifting the toes to activate the muscles in the top of the foot. And one of the reasons is with an awareness of those muscles in the top of the foot, we can engage the arches a bit more. The stability is spread out a bit more, particularly the transverse arch. So this is a trick that I use quite a lot with my squishy feet. But then eventually we should be able to let the toes relax and still find that sensation in the feet. But since everything is attached, I'll give you a way of thinking about the legs that I've been using in myself and others. So since I have kids in my life who like superheroes, I use the superhero analogy for the legs. So there's Wonder Woman, who is a goddess. And so if Wonder Woman wants to fly, she can just lift up and magic, divine energy carries her up. But Supergirl is an alien on Earth. So Supergirl still feels the pull of gravity, though differently. Don't really understand why. I don't know the stories that well, but she has to put some energy into lifting off the floor. So the legs we have are a bit more like Supergirl, that they're not just straight and waiting to be lifted up. They're sort of ready for action, ready to spring. So the feeling of the legs is an upward lifting, as if you're about to fly off into the sky. So just use that image. So again, this is the imagination applied to the sensations in the body. And what we're looking to cue with that kind of description is to avoid things like pushing the knees back and locking them, because you can't lift off when the knees are locked. They have to be a little bit ready to go. So it's not that you can't straighten the legs, you can straighten them, but straighten them through the lifting. And at the same time, you have to press off of the floor. So there's a pressing down as you lift up. And that activates really the inner thighs, the abductors. And at the same time, you look for the samastiti feeling in both feet. And just to wake up that sensation a little bit, keep the feet where they are. Don't move the feet, and bring the legs together. So pull the legs together as much as you can. Keep the feet exactly where they are. So you're pushing the legs together, but using the friction of the floor to keep the feet where they are. So pull your legs together, push. Notice what gets activated. Not just the legs, feel what's happening, the pelvis, the belly, the back maybe, and then release. And then same idea, but now moving the legs outward. Legs go apart from each other, apart. Keep the feet on the floor, moving the legs apart from each other, and then relax. And so as we lift up in this Supergirl kind of posture, there's a feeling of support through the abductors, inner thighs, pushing the floor away from you. So just stand there for a moment and notice the sensation. And then just some insights on this relationship between these 3 points. Imagine on the floor there is a figure 8, an infinity symbol. And you're going to move your attention and also a little bit of weight on your body. So take one foot and bring the big toe side of the ball of the foot a little bit more strongly into the floor. And then move the weight to the little toe ball of the foot side, and then move to the heel. And then we're going to go to the other foot, big toe side, little toe side, heel, and then back to the first side, big toe, little toe, heel, and keep making this figure 8. The motion can be as large or as small as you like. Just feel the weight transfer. Notice if each of those points can be precisely felt. So maybe some of those points are a little bit more squishy, not so defined as one point. And some of those points may be easy to find the precise location. Notice the balance in your body. You can do this with eyes open or closed. So you're shifting just a little bit the weight of your feet, and that impacts the whole structure above you. And then if it's comfortable doing that, reverse the direction. So start with the heel of one foot, the little toe side, the big toe side, back to the heel of the other foot, little toe, big toe, heel. So now your figure 8 is going in the opposite direction. Just noticing if this feels just as easy or a little difficult or easier than the other side. And since this is really just an experiment on the mat, you're just collecting data, noticing what's there. Notice how it impacts your balance. And which way just feels simply more comfortable. And then come back to the center, Samastiti, and balance. And just by a show of hands, Lindsay, you can keep your camera off, but for everybody whose camera is on, how many of you found it easier to do it the first direction? It's okay if you don't know. So one person found it easier that way. Did anybody find it easier to go the opposite direction, the second side? Okay, 3-1, okay. Did anybody find no difference? So Melanie found no difference. So these are 3 different observations, none of them right, none of them wrong. Just take that information to yourself and just know that this movement, this heel, little toe, big toe, heel, little toe, big toe, heel, little toe, big toe, is sort of one way to move forward. Whereas if we go big toe, little toe, heel, big toe, little toe, heel, we're moving backward now. So the first way we went was backward kind of walking, and the second way was a forward kind of walking. So just take a moment. So take that information, move a little bit, feel the feet. And, you know, backwards, we don't have a lot of options with backwards, just big toe, little toe, heel. It doesn't really work to go heel first. But, you know, walking forward, we have many options. You know, I used to participate in a martial arts called Jolong Bagwashong. It has a lot of walking in it, walking in circles. And there's several different steps and ways of stepping. So mostly we think of heel to toe walking, but there's also ball of the foot to the heel, a little more flexibility in our forward motion. And then just one more little exercise with enough space to move a few steps backwards and a few steps forward. So in your small space, just have the ability to stay here and then take a couple steps back. And we're going to move about that much. So this exercise is just a way to tap into sort of the inherent wisdom that your body has, or the information your physical structure is carrying about how we move through the world. So just look down at your feet, feel the placement of the feet, that distribution, sort of feel like your feet are aligned the way they should be. And then the rest of the exercise we're going to do with the eyes closed, or at least not looking at the feet. If you have balance issues and need to keep the eyes open, just keep the eyes forward so you're not looking at the feet. And all we're going to do is, first of all, just feel the pressure of the feet and feel like the hips, knees, ankles are aligned. You may have to move the position of the feet just a little bit. Feel a little step up and down. Feel that equal balance. And then we're just going to take about maybe 3 steps back, whatever your space allows. So just moving back without looking at the feet. And then moving forward somewhere around the starting point. Don't look at the feet, keep the eyes closed or look forward. And again, just feel like the feet are under the knees, under the ankles, in balance, equal distribution. Once you feel like you really have the perfect position for the feet, just look down and notice if the feet look the same way as when you started, when you were looking at the feet for visual guidance. Don't move from here. If you can, keep your feet in the same position. Does anybody's feet look different than when they started? So 2 of us, does anybody's feet look exactly the same position? All right.
Mine
So
are
2 and
different.
2. Yours are different. Okay. Ah, thank you, Lindsay. So those of you whose feet are in a different position, notice if one foot is turned out, maybe more than the other. Maybe one foot is a little more forward than the other. And if your feet are asymmetric or different than how they looked initially, see if you can create the mirror image of that foot position. So for me, my right foot's a little turned out. I'm going to straighten my right foot and then turn my left foot out. So creating the mirror image, and then just notice how your body feels standing on backwards feet, so to speak. And then if you want to get a sensation of this with the arms, just cross the arms for a moment. Whichever arm is on top, put it on the bottom. Notice if your body keeps tricking you. And just notice these 2 sensations. So now my arms and my feet are backwards, which just doesn't feel quite as comfortable. So just notice these pre-programs that we have in our bodies. So for me, and for many people, this is something Leslie pointed out beautifully, many people are standing in sort of a version of this posture, some version of warrior. Mine changes from time to time. Right now, I'm a little more of a right-footed warrior. I typically tend to be a left-footed warrior because I'm a little more left dominated. So there's a little more strength happening in this side of my body. So as we approach movement of the body, we talked about understanding the baseline of our nervous system, and this is about understanding the baseline of our body. So for several reasons, my asana practice needs to be asymmetric because I have inherent asymmetries in my structure because of the history of my body in this life. And for me, doing symmetric practice over and over will just amplify those asymmetries. So we connect with this wisdom of the body and come back to this this same idea that there's a baseline for the body and also for the nervous system. And everybody who's trained in the Vinyasa system, we've talked about this in the training that sometimes you might need to do something more on one side than on the other side. We have what we explored, especially through this last year and a half, through the pandemic times, as we changed how we're spending our daily life. Like for me, I was sitting so much more than I had been. That as we got online to start, I had to ask everybody just to feel left and right side. And we would start every class from feel the left and the right side. And if one side feels less comfortable, let's start with that side. So some people starting right, some people starting left. And so working from that point. So everything that we do in the standing postures, at least with my practices, we do from this point in the body. So before we sit down, let's just do a little bit of simple movement. As any movement you'd like to do, I'm just going to do a little bit of movement with the arms and with the back. But just take a moment, feel your breath. And let your arms move a little bit, the neck move a little bit. And then we're going to sit down and we're going to move a little bit with sound. And then a little bit with an inner visualization and connection with imagination. So usually when I teach this kind of sequence in a larger class, we have the first part of this connecting with the earth through the feet. And since some of you were with me in Assisi, I just wanted to bring in Mario Tanavaro, a Buddhist teacher who comes with us for a day there. And he said once something really beautiful that I use often. He said that suffering exists between the sky and the earth. And when we come back to our heart, we bring the earth and sky together, and there is no space for suffering. So this idea of connecting to the earth, we usually follow with some connection to the sky and then bringing them together in this image that Mario so beautifully created. So this is this image of, or this idea of nyasa that Mirka uses so beautifully in all of her guided classes. Bringing imagination into movement. Continue for a moment. Just making the sound ah. Ah. At the end of every exhale, just repeat, noticing where the sound resonates in your body. Whatever pitch or whatever volume works for you, just feel that sound. Let the mouth be open. Ah, so making the sound, the jaws open, it's like an exaggerated ah. Ah. And then we're going to shift that sound a little bit. E. The sound E. Notice the mouth changes, the vibration changes location. E. So feeling this other sound. And if you want to feel the relationship between the first and second sound, just make both sounds in one exhale. So switching from sound to sound as many times as feels comfortable. Notice where the resonance shifts in your mouth, in your face, in your head. And then we'll add a third sound that you can play with, experiment with. The next sound is O. O. Again, just a few times to feel the new sound and where it resonates in the face, how the lips change to participate in the sound. And to feel the relationship with the first two sounds. And then one more sound ooh. Ooh. Noticing more participation of the lips. So just notice the flow of vibration through the different sounds, through the palate of the mouth. Notice how much or how little the jaw is involved in these sounds. The lips. And so we'll practice a way of touching upon all of these sounds at the same time. This is the first part of the sacred sound of Om. So as if you're making the ooh and the ah at the same time. So the mouth is ready for the ooh, the whole palate and back of the throat open. So try that. See if you can keep the throat open like ah, and keep the mouth engaged like ooh, and have that vibration moving through the whole palate. And the very part of Om is the bringing of the lips together to stop the sound. So before you run out of air, opening up the palate, the one sound that covers all the others, and the lips together to stop the sound. Let the sound keep moving through the closed lips as and then silence. So just give that a try. And then as you feel ready, just let the sound subside and notice the sensations. So the using of mantra, the using of sound, waking up different places within the body, depending on the pitch, on the placement, on the sound. So that through sound, it becomes a little easier to tap into sensations inside of this meat body. And then we're just going to take this exploration of sensations of the body a little deeper, a little more personal. If you like, maybe even keep your video off for this next part if it's comfortable. Otherwise, stay where you are. Because just the idea of having the camera can be a bit of a distraction as you feel what's happening within your own mind. So I'd like you to have the safety and sensation of not being on while you're just feeling your body. And so now we're going to touch on emotions. So an exercise I've been doing with my children since they were small is asking them to feel in their body different feelings. So we'd start with happiness. If you could feel happiness in your body, where would you feel it? I think sometimes these exercises are easier with small children because it is immediately a game. And so my oldest would tell me, she wouldn't just tell me where it was, she would tell me what color it is and what animal it was. So we had an animal that represented different emotions. So I thought something that could be helpful today is to ask you to think of something that's been alive for you recently. Has there been an emotion that has been having a big impact on your life recently? This can be an emotion that feels pleasurable, an emotion that might feel uncomfortable, but something that's sort of been there for you recently. And whatever this emotion is, you can give it a name. Just speak it to yourself. And imagine this emotion lives somewhere within your body. Just feel the sensation of your body and notice if there is an obvious place where this emotion lives. And if there's not an obvious place, consider where this emotion might live. So either way, you bring your attention to a place in your body that you feel might be in relationship with this emotion. Imagine that this emotion living somewhere in your body, it's a particular shape. Imagine perhaps this emotion, if you could reach inside and bring it out and sit it on the floor in front of you for a moment. If that image is comfortable and possible in this moment, then just notice how this emotion appears to you. Its size, its color, its shape. Sitting in front of you in all its glory. Imagine for a moment that you could speak with this emotion sitting in front of you. And just consider these questions. Ask it, where do you come from? Where do you come from? What do you want from me? Or what do you need from me? How would you feel if I could give you what you need? So you may not have answers to all these questions, but you could imagine sitting for a moment in the place of your strong emotion, looking back at yourself. And through the voice of this emotion, telling yourself what you need and what you want. And back in the seat of your own image, looking down at your emotion. Ask, can you become my ally? How will you help me? How will you protect me? And just staying for a moment, sitting next to your protector, your ally. Holding this image as long as it comfortably stays. And as your mind feels soft and relaxed, just expand into sensation of spaciousness, rooted on the earth below, sky above. And invite the breath to become a little deeper. Noticing that space in your body where you found this emotion living. As you breathe a little deeper, activating the energy of the body. Just notice the sensations on that part of your body. Just touch upon this mantra with each breath. As you inhale, the infinite vastness of the universe approaches you. You pause after inhale, that infinite vastness resides within you. And as you exhale, you expand into that infinite vastness. Pause after the exhale and remain in that space of unity. Inhale, the universe approaching, holding, residing in you. Exhale, expanding back into the universe and staying in that space of unity. Expanding the imagination now from a sensation in your body out to the deepest, brightest spaces in the universe. Let the breath settle, let the mind relax. Just noticing this capacity of our imagination to awaken sensations in the body, to drive the reaction in our nervous system, in our physiology, and the capacity of our imagination to bring us to an awareness, a spaciousness of the infinite vastness around us, and to give us a sense of unity with it all. So it's not just in our imagination, it is in our imagination, the tremendous power within that to guide our mind and attention where we choose it to be. The Anomaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. And then as you feel ready, slowly come back into the sensation of the spaces around you. Begin to bring your attention back to this gathering space, community space. And if and when you feel ready to come on again to the cameras, feel free to turn them on. Catherine is now covered in light instead of darkness. And please share any thoughts or feedback or sensations.
Sounds are powerful, and they give me some kind of vibration inside afterwards. And out of that, I expected this practice to bring my difficult feelings up to the surface, but instead I felt some happy inspiration. Not what I expected.
And when that happens, we celebrate it.
Because I felt that's what's in the bottom of me, coming up like a sprout. And then looking at the twilight on the sky in front of me, I just felt, yeah.
Wonderful. And for those of us who are very visual people, I find this particular meditation really powerful of what image pops into my mind each time I do this. And yeah, so for each person, we experience these exercises differently depending on how our minds are wired. So just yeah, be attentive to that experience and how it arises within you.
I wanted to, this is Kat. I wanted to share that when we started practicing walking again, my body just wanted to kind of move and stretch and dance. It's been a really long time that I've paid that much attention to a particular ordinary movement. And so my body wanted to kind of move unstructured in an unstructured way. And so that kind of carried through just the last exercise where I think there's been a lot of, because life has been so much, I think there's been an intentional kind of stilling of emotions just to be able to get through. And so I wasn't quite ready to, my body wasn't quite ready to go and sit with a particular emotion. But what it wanted to do was actually rolling an emotion through my body. So I was kind of imagining an emotion on the tip of my finger. Like I touched the table in front of me and felt an emotion there, and I just kind of started rolling it kind of through my body.
Sweet.
I think it just wanted to be, I think the emotions just wanted to move for a change.
Beautiful. That's a great way of expressing too how we, like when you said the stilling of emotions, because there's so much of this happening all around. I can relate to that really strongly. And yeah, I think that's a beautiful image. So what a beautiful way to do this practice.
Hasn't Mirka some kind of expression like motions needs to be in motion?
That sounds like Mirka. Yeah, well, she's been moving a lot with ecstatic movement. So that was sort of the, where she came into the spiritual traditions. She moved from activism to ecstatic dance community. And so through this Corona time, if you've stayed with her online in her teachings, that's been coming up for her, because I think she's also been feeling this same way that Catherine was expressing. This my body needs to move, like things need to move because there's a stuckness happening. And so the movement is yeah, very much there. It's very much in line with the ecstatic dance movement community.
And how movement can release feelings that are stuck.
Yes, yeah, very much. Thank you.
And I think for me, it was really helpful to be so focused on one small part of our body and movement, like our feet and walking, that helped me focus for the visualization. So that was a nice connection. And Tammy, I'm really interested in hearing that you have hypermobility, because so do I. And the older I get, the more I realize what an effect that's had on my physiology all my life. And, I never really realized that until I started practicing yoga. So.
Yeah, and it's a double-edged sword with yoga because you can do all the crazy looking postures,
Yeah,
and but as Gary told me, you can do things, but should you do things? And
Yeah.
so
yeah,
because this is my body, it feels normal to me, but
yeah,
then I talk to other people and realize not everybody's joints adjust daily.
yeah, drives my
My
chiropractor
thoracic,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, because when I do, touch the floor, my cervical spine goes tuk, 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 every day.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have that experience. Or me, my sternoclavicle joint has become expressive in the past year as I started building upper body strength. And my husband says, "Man, I wish mine could do that," because I'll
Wow.
feel some tightness here, and it goes tuk. But yeah, so this normal of body is something I actually want to explore with more hypermobile people, because we traditional cueing, I worked with, so Eurus was my first teacher. People from Vinny Yoga know who Eurus is. I was really fortunate that he was my first teacher. I came from martial arts before I met that community, and I completely had destabilized my shoulders because I had been working with a lot of men with really strong collagen. So
Oh,
I injured my shoulder. So I came into yoga with injury, and he saw my body and immediately recognized the need to look for stability in my practice. And so after injuring myself a few times, trying to push myself in certain ways, he helped me, along with Mary Hallway, helped me find that capacity to be safe in a group class. As he told me, he said, "When I tell everybody to straighten their leg, I'm not talking to you."
yeah,
And and things like that. So the way that our bodies work aren't typically the cueing that people do in group classes doesn't work for our bodies. They're not intended for our body type. Yeah, so that'll be a future workshop. I'll make sure
I love
to
that.
message
I
you
love
about
that.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else, Lori or Melanie or Lindsay, anything to share? Lotta?
I have to go. I'm going to meet
Lotta froze.
Forest. I have to leave the meeting.
Say that again?
I have to leave the meeting. I'm going to go with Jurid on
Okay.
a walk in the dark forest. Bye.
Oh, beautiful. Enjoy. Oh, Lori, Lindsay, or Melody, I'm here for you if you should need to share. And oh, that was a message from, okay, from Lotta. All right, if not, ladies, then I'll be in touch. I'll share the picture of my feet in case that's useful, and the link to the conversation about the meat beings on this planet, because it's a great piece of science fiction. Yeah, any
I enjoyed
thoughts?
that one, Tammy, I enjoyed the meat. I did read that. I
Oh,
enjoyed it.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes.
Yes, so keep in touch and share any thoughts, insights. Your wisdoms are great wisdoms for all of us. We can all learn from you. So next week, same time, same place. Hopefully my Tuesday internet problems stop, but thanks for your patience, for the choppiness at the beginning. And we'll see you next week.